What is going on, everyone? If you watched my last YouTube video, which was my first time watch reaction to the episode of Breaking Bad, Ozymandias, you discovered that I have never seen Breaking Bad before until now. I began watching the show in January, and I recently finished it for the first time. And because Breaking Bad is so iconic and many people consider this to be the best TV show of all time, since I started watching the TV show, I decided that I wanted to do an in-depth review and give you guys all of my thoughts on how I feel about the entirety of Breaking Bad. I mean, it's fairly obvious that Breaking Bad is extremely popular based on how many views I got in the first couple of hours of my last video. Anyway, let's dive right into my thoughts of this entire TV show. Where do I begin? There are 5 seasons, 62 episodes. It took me about 2 months, I want to say, to watch this show consistently. I did want to give myself a couple of breaks because from time to time, this show is very heavy and it's not always easy to watch it straight through. Plus, I love just enjoying TV shows and not getting through the entire thing extremely quick. When I started watching Breaking Bad in January, I knew I was going to make a video on the TV show when I was done. So when I started the show, I began writing down notes. And now that I'm finished, I have a page full of notes and it's one scrambled mess. But let me read to you guys a few of the notes that I wrote down early to see how my early thoughts didn't exactly come true to what I thought the show would eventually turn into. Season 1, we see Walter go from a family man to the Walter White everyone knows. Character progression is so strong. Well, for myself, Walter White never became the Walter White that I initially expected him to become. Before I watched the show, I always imagined Walter kind of being similar to what Gustavo Fring was in Breaking Bad, but unfortunately for Walter, he was never really that good of a businessman. While he was a great cook, he wasn't great in keeping his partners and everything outside of the kitchen intact. Jesse and Walt show a lot of fear in the early seasons, like with Tuco. Does that change? I guess in some ways, because in the early seasons, when Tuco was holding them captive in season 2, we saw that Jesse and Walt were terrified. But as the show goes on, they don't come off as scared when they are in danger. And that's probably because they are so numb to being in this industry for the entirety of the series that it just doesn't affect them as much. But still, they're not as good at their job like somebody such as Gustavo Fring. But here's where my notes stop making predictions and where I start talking about what I actually love about the show. So let's get right into that. I think what makes Breaking Bad super popular and extremely crazy is that Walt and Jesse don't always get along. They aren't the best partners, and so they find themselves on multiple occasions in really big messes. Like the whole thing with Crazy 8 and Tuco and Walt being in the hospital and Jesse being in the hospital and Jesse versus Hank and Walt killing Gus's guys and Gustavo Fring versus Walt. There are so many messes that these guys get themselves into that over time, you just realize that their lives are never going to be normal again since they got themselves into this mess from the beginning by cooking meth. But what differentiates Breaking Bad so much from many other TV shows is that some moments literally have nothing to do with the main plot points. Like for instance, Walt giving Walt Jr. driving lessons or Walt fixing the water system underneath his house. For many, I'm sure those were the worst points of the show, but for myself, I enjoyed seeing that since 95% of the show revolves around Walt and Jesse getting into these huge messes in the meth business. So taking a break from that and just seeing Walt and Jesse live a normal life and do normal people things, that was great to see. Now, this is the part of my notes where I laugh a little bit because I wrote down that Walt and Jesse in the first couple of seasons, even though they might get into many fights and seem like they hate each other, they still deep down truly care about one another no matter how many times they argue. Like in season 2 when Walt checks Jesse in the rehab, or in season 3 when Walt kills those 2 men that Jesse was planning on killing, but Walt does it for him so he can save his butt. But pretty much the rest of their relationship is them cooking meth together or them arguing, bickering back and forth constantly. That's what their main dynamic is for a majority of the show, and it doesn't ever get old. It's actually really entertaining. If Walt and Jesse got along and they had no problems, this show would probably be really boring. Before I watched Breaking Bad, I always imagined Walt and Jesse being this perfect duo, having zero issues, always getting along, never having a single issue in the business. They are basically the Gustavo Fring of the TV show. That's at least what I thought in my head, but no, it did not turn out that way at all. I also thought that Walt and Jesse would be the leaders of the meth industry. I thought they would have their own meth business, not be working for anybody else like Gus Fring. That never really happened, especially not in season 5, even though they tried. And I don't know about you guys, but during my first watch of Breaking Bad, especially in the first couple of seasons, there were multiple moments that I had to pause just because of how stressful these moments ended up becoming. Going back to the Crazy 8 scenario where Walt had to decide whether or not to kill Crazy 8 or let him go, I had to pause the moment where Walt was about to choke Crazy 8 to death, because in this moment, you began to care so much about Crazy 8 and Walt's relationship. In just a span of 5 to 10 minutes, you could tell that these men were making a real life connection. They had a genuine conversation, but Crazy 8 unfortunately had to double cross Walt. He had this broken piece of plate in his jacket. He was going to kill him with it after Walt let him go. So Walt realized, I can't let this man go. He's going to kill me, so I have to kill him. Before that moment happened, I had to pause it because I knew what was coming, but it was so stressful and extremely well directed. By the time we get to season 3, though, this is where the emotion eventually begins to pour on, where we have Hank, one of my favorite characters of the first 4 seasons of Breaking Bad, who you think might get killed by these 2 cousins who are related to Tuco and trying to avenge him. By the way, though, speaking of Hank and all the other characters, for the most part, in the first 4 seasons, I would like to say, I never had a single problem with any of the characters. I liked just about everyone who was considered a good guy, like Walt, Hank, Jesse, even Walt's wife, Skyler, who has a ton of issues with Walt in the first 2 to 3 seasons and then eventually gets into the business herself. But everyone seemed to hate her and her sister, Marie. I never really blamed them for their actions, though, in the show. It's not really their faults for what Walt does in the show and what Hank does in the show. I can't really blame them for doing what they had to do. At one point, Skyler kicked Walt out of the house, and rightfully so. He wasn't being truthful. He lied to her multiple times. But if you look from Walt's perspective, he had to do what he had to do in order to make money for his family, because being a teacher for a high school in many states, it doesn't pay very well. And for Walt, he was struggling. He had cancer. He had to do what he had to do for his kids and his wife. But in the moments where Walter is not Walter White and you see him as Heisenberg, I kind of thought of Roger Kent from The Usual Suspects as Kaiser Sose. They reminded me an awful lot of each other. But besides the show's incredible acting, not to mention how the facial expressions are nailed to a T, the show for many people is great because of the amount of nail-biting sequences over the course of the entirety of Breaking Bad. Once again, like Hank versus the 2 cousins, Gale, and the season 3 cliffhanger, the season 4 finale where half of Gus's face is blown off, and in the final 3 episodes of Breaking Bad in particular, Hank's death in Ozymandias, which was very emotional and extremely sad. So in general, Breaking Bad has so many great nail-biting sequences, it's as if the Safdie brothers made a TV show themselves. But I still think it's funny that I expected something completely different before watching Breaking Bad than what I eventually got, even though prior to watching Breaking Bad years in advance, I did get spoiled Walt's death at the end of the show, but whatever, we all knew it was coming. There are so many more things I could talk about with Breaking Bad, but let me get into a few problems that I had with the show, which is why I'm not totally sure if I would consider this my favorite TV show of all time in comparison to other people. I think my main issue with Breaking Bad is how some integral storylines get dropped after the first couple of seasons. Like the plane crash at the end of season 2, that was the cliffhanger of that season, and by season 3, it was kind of an afterthought. Jesse's PTSD from killing Gale is a big thing in season 4, but after about 7 to 8 episodes in that season, It's also kind of an afterthought. He just gets over it and lives his life, even though it still affects him. We never had that integral scene to see Jesse truly coming to terms with how much that affected him. It's just one of those things where it passes and you forget about it after the season is over. And remember when Hank was recovering from getting shot and Marie was taking care of him? Yeah, Hank was being pretty mean to her during that time, but we never understand why. And after a couple of episodes, that completely stops, and now Hank is nice to her by the time season 4 rolls around. And at the end of season 4 and in the first episode of season 5, Ted, who Skylar had an affair with, is hospitalized, and he may never walk again. This comes off as troubling to Skylar, but after the first episode of season 5, they never talk about it again. We never learn anything more about Ted's situation. Did the man recover, or is he just screwed for the rest of his life? I just think that sometimes Breaking Bad is a little bit of a scrambled mess. It tries to balance way too many plot points to where it can't do all of that at the same time. When the show is focusing on its really important plots, it tends to forget about the side plots, and eventually it just blows over them. But you know what? By season 5 and in the last 2 episodes, I forgot all about that, because these final 2 episodes are the best episodes of the entire series in my opinion. When Walt kills all of those Nazis in the final sequence of Breaking Bad to avenge the death of Hank, it is so emotionally satisfying. And when Jesse kills Todd, I was all in it. So even though Walt is one of the biggest liars on the face of the planet, he lied to Skylar on multiple occasions. He lied to Jesse about Jane, about poisoning Brock, and about killing Mike. You know deep down that he did everything he had to do for the love of his family. He began doing this for his kids and his wife. I'm sure that Skylar and Walt Jr. will never get over some of these things, but at the end of the day, Walt did truly care about Jesse, Hank, Marie, Skylar, Walt Jr., and his baby Holly. So I guess this is the point in my scrambled review where I give you guys my grade. Breaking Bad is a truly incredible show. It is definitely up there for one of my favorites. Yes, there are some points in the show where I felt like they didn't pay enough attention to a few plots that I really cared about myself. But the show has multiple nail-biting sequences, some of the best performances I have ever seen from a cast on a TV show. And overall, Breaking Bad is just an iconic show. There's a reason why so many people love it, and now I understand why. I'm going to give Breaking Bad an A. Originally, I was going to give Breaking Bad an A-, but after thinking about it and realizing that I missed watching the show so much, it was pretty much what I did for most of the time over 2 months, I just had to give the show an A. It just missed the mark of an A+. And I cannot wait to watch El Camino. I'm going to watch that next. For you guys who also happen to see Breaking Bad, be sure to let me down below in the comment section what your full thoughts on the TV series are. I have a lot of things to do. I gotta review the first episode of The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, as well as the second episode, and the Justice League Snyder Cut. That movie is 4 hours long. It just came out. I gotta watch it. I have to find the time, but March Madness has been taking up so much of it that I'm having a lot of trouble balancing it all out, but I'll get to it this week, I promise. As always, guys, if you are new to my channel, click the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Thank you all so much for watching this video, and I hope you all have a fantastic day.